Hello, I am Radagast at your service with Mystic View number 6. And this one is, I'm going to call, well, I put it, I forget what I put the title is, but it's like importance of holiday traditions in a culture or in cultures. And so I kind of got to that subject speaking with one of my friends. I'll even mention her name, Mary Beth. And it was Mary Beth and Lucy who really kind of spearheaded our New Paradigm gathering that we had on December 6th. And we're heading into our next one on January 21st, which will be a New Paradigm gathering with Love for All, Hatred for None Day as the focus. And so I'm going to try to tie some of it in with where I'm going here. And boy, my facial hair looks discombobulated. Can't do much about it. Anyway, so while it was actually a pretty good conversation because it touches upon a lot of where we're going in the new paradigm, and also ties into some of the issues around why we don't like other people, why anger, fear, hatred, those things that kind of wrap up into each other come about from differences in culture. And we're going to have to get over the differences because culture is kind of what's important to us as human beings. And it's what makes us different in nice ways. When I think of human cultures, I think of any kind of culture. So think of cheeses. You know, you can use the same kind of milk, and then according to which culture you put in the milk, you get different cheeses. And of course, certain cheeses may appeal to others or not. But to think of hating a cheese simply because it tastes different would be crazy. You might not want to put it in your mouth. You might go, "Oh, I really don't like," or even might say, "I hate the taste of that cheese," but you wouldn't hate the cheese. But so what we were talking about was I had spent the Christmas holidays down there with her in Pennsylvania, with her, and also my friend Wayne came by, another GMOP person and somebody who's been playing a very helpful role with GMOP, and which is Global Mission of Peace for those who don't know GMOP. And none of us I went over her one of her daughter's houses, and with the kids and everything. And it was just, it was a really beautiful holiday for me, even though it isn't necessarily a holy day for me, because any day can be a holy day for me. But holiday means holy day. It's really, that's what holiday is. It's a quick, they changed the Y to an I, put it as two words, one word instead of two words, and instead of holy day, you get holiday. And who knows, it might have been all part of the secularizing or the, removing the spirituality from our language. But what we were both remarking on, because she, although I think she was raised Catholic, is no longer really a practicing Christian. And I haven't been a practicing or even, I haven't been a Christian of any sorts for a very long time. Even though I was raised as an Episcopalian, was an altar boy and things like that. Actually, it was being an altar boy that, and being able to sit down and have real conversations with the two reverends that were part of our church, that I came to the conclusion that not a whole lot here. And in many ways, you could say, but of course, there's always that saying, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. So when it comes to Christianity, the baby is Jesus, baby Jesus. But the bathwater to me is the religions that built around him, especially the Pauline version. And that's a bathwater that I dumped out a long time ago and kept the baby. But even with keeping the baby, the whole part of Christmas is, it's part of our culture. The culture of America has celebrated Christmas since the beginning of America. I'm not sure when Santa Claus was invented. Santa Claus might come a little bit later because he comes from Saint Nicholas, who's kind of a magical being from, I guess, the Scandinavian cultures that we ended up incorporating. And then, of course, there's all the commercial incrustation that came with that. But that's how the conversation started. Where she's saying, she said, I really still like Christmas, even though I'm not really, it's not about the commercialism. It's not necessarily, it's not about the religion or anything. I can straighten that out a little bit. And that's what I said. No, it's part of a tradition. Cultures have traditions. And so around the winter solstice in our country, which, you could say Christian leaning, but around the solstice time, during, which is a meaningful time for just about every culture on the planet. I mean, the 4 major sun changes is an important event. We mark them with our seasons. And in the past, those seasons were also feast and rest days. And that's really where we kind of come to where our traditions are, is we get times to rest because, there's holidays, people get days off from work. They aren't expected to show up. Although more so in modern than in the old times when basically everything's shut down. But in the name of commerciality and making a buck, more and more places started staying open on Christmas. Now, of course, for some people, that also was a plus side because certain things were available. But that's also one of the reasons why mixing cultures together can be very useful, because where one culture is maybe doing a high tradition or holy day for itself, one of the other cultures that we live in, mixed cultures, it says, good, this is the day I'll be open and I'll be glad to take your money. It can work out very nice. But the whole part of these holidays is around the rest and the feasting and the coming together of family in that ability to rest. And of course, you can have a feast, you want to have a bunch of people to share the food with. And then the importance of tradition. And so really, it brings us to examine our cultures and our traditions and how even if they have roots in something else, there is still the tradition in the culture. And so Christmas, when I was young and growing up in the Bronx, I lived initially when my family first moved into those apartments that we had, and it was kind of like 2 buildings with different addresses, but they were connected by the same roof. And there was 20 apartments in each building, so it was 40 apartments altogether. And in the neighborhood or the building I moved into, I was in a Gentile family. There was one other Gentile family, so there was two Gentile families in 40 apartments and 38 Jewish families in the remaining apartments. So one of the things I remember is my mother would have open house on Christmas. And we had many of our neighbors come and celebrate Christmas with us. And our neighbors were Jewish. And most of the neighbors brought some small gift for myself and my sister. And of course, my mother was a cook and had a grand layout, and food is something everybody appreciates. So, and one of the reasons why did we have Jews at Christmas? Because Jews are part of the culture of America. And so, again, they were there very happily in sharing, feasting, a day of rest, and just having fun with friends. And I really felt great comfort in my 62nd year of a tradition that I can remember, not quite 60 years of it, but almost 60 years of it. And just how nice it is to connect with that continuum. And so that just brought to me to, if here I am, I'm no longer a Christian, haven't been a Christian for most of my life. I stopped being an altar boy at 14. And so that's a long stretch of not being Christian. But still really loving the tradition. And and celebrating that tradition, and in the culture now. What's nice is cultures are shifting a little bit. The standard American culture isn't what it used to be, especially with now we have a whole alternative awakened community, and the awakened community is kind of a subculture. It's almost, just like the hippies were a subculture of basic American culture. The alternative American is a little bit different than, let's call it, the MSM, the mainstream media America. They're different cultures because they're getting different information. When they sit down to talk, if they do talk about events in the world, their worldviews are different, and that creates a subculture. But subcultures are cultures also. But generally they're derivative, and there's a lot of commonality between the mainstream culture and the subculture. There's still a lot of dialogue. Each side, especially the subculture, usually knows the culture that it came out of. They know all of like the kind of background there, so it's very easy. There's not a lot of places to really meet stepping stones or any kind of blockages, unless of course you get somebody who insists, like from the alternative community, in pounding somebody about chemtrails when somebody thinks they're still contrails. I mean, a big part of whether or not we have clashes or not is choosing our conversations wisely. If you really want a world that is a little smoother and less fraught with the nonsense, it is a lot easier if you're comfortable with your own beliefs. And being comfortable with your own beliefs means often when you reach somebody who doesn't have the same belief, you don't really have a juice to impose your belief on them because you're comfortable. It's the people who are playing with new beliefs very often. They're not, maybe not completely settled in what they believe, that they then pound other people because they're actually looking to feel better about their decision about where they are by having other people go, oh yeah. And that's a little insecure. And that kind of insecurity is where loggerheads can be set up, where one person insists on that their view is superior to another person's view. I'm quite dumbfounded and mystified, especially when I point to a younger person. But if I remember one time pointing to a chemtrail to somebody, I guess maybe in their upper 20s. I go, oh boy, they're trashing the skies again with chemtrails. And he had said to me, I don't know if I believe in those chemtrails. And I said, you don't believe what you see? Oh no, that's a contrail. So what was I going to do? Tell him you're stupid? Am I going to tell him that the news sources that he considers reliable, or am I going to tell him they are liars? There's nothing will put somebody on a defensive quicker than telling them that what they believe is wrong. There are ways of kind of coming around backwards to that if you have the energy and you really feel it's that important. To me, him believing there were chemtrails probably wasn't going to stop that plane or that jet up above me from trashing the sky. So at that point, this is a guy I had a pretty decent relationship with. We were friendly. And I said, you know what? This guy is not going to be moved easily. I'm content with this friendship. I know that he's not as open as I thought he was. So I got a new read on this acquaintance of mine. But I really think that the traditions, especially the traditions that we get joy from, are something that we would be encouraged to keep. And by further really acknowledging our tradition and our culture and our enjoyment of it, if we're going to be fair and we're going to be in our hearts about things, when we look at other traditions and cultures, we can celebrate it at least from their perspective, from being in their shoes, from engaging in a few moments of empathy. And the reason I say a few moments, because as you might know from my videos I made a long time ago, I speak on philosophy, New Age, and a lot of the different things that people talk about. And I think psychology, human psychology, is one of the most important subjects to talk about, because what makes us human is our psychology. Without our psychology, we're animals. And so our psychological makeup is huge in being human and in getting along with other humans, because it's all psychology. And so empathy and sympathy are ways of quickly To me, I call empathy getting a reading on somebody, basically getting, where they're at. I would, for me, reading somebody empathically is kind of very similar to putting my finger in water to see if it's hot, cold, or just to know what the temperature is. I don't need to leave my finger in. And one of the things about leaving your finger in water is whatever your body temperature is. If the water is cooler, your finger will start to adapt to that water. If it's hotter, it will adapt to that water. If you stay in empathy too long, you will start to adapt to that vibe. And unless you want that vibe, it's good to get in and get out. You've got your reading. That's all you need. Empathy is a reading. Sympathy is staying in empathy a little bit longer. It's kind of like riding the wavelength a little bit, walking in somebody's shoes. But even then, you don't have to walk in shoes very more to know if they're too short, too small for you, too big, fit just right, or whatever. So to me, a lot of empathy and sympathy are important things to have, but they're not things. It's not like to be empathetic. Once you get a reading on empathetic, you either will respond with compassion, which to me is the emotion that we want to use. Once you empathize with somebody, and if you want to go a little bit further and sympathize with them, you get out, and then you get into your heart, you get into compassion, and then from compassion, you'll have compassionate action instead of empathetic action or sympathetic action, because especially in most cases where you want to help, your action is going to hopefully be assistive, and it won't be the same energy. So you want your reading on those energies, but you want to function you really want to come from compassion. You don't want to come from sympathy. And this is really important, because sympathetic can get you over-involved. Compassion, which is a place of heart and wisdom and knowing, will give you how to respond if you're going to respond. And it's nice to respond if you can, if you move to. And compassion, and that's what compassion kind of does. You get into a place, you'll know what the response is. You'll also know whether or not you have the time to respond. Sometimes remediation will take some real steps. So sometimes a kind word will be compassionate. Sometimes getting involved will be the compassion. And again, it's kind of a give or take and situational, as most things are. And by appreciating, so now I can finish off with that. By appreciating other people's cultures and traditions, again, if it really seems weird a little bit, try and sympathize. Get into the head for a second and go, oh, this is what it looks like from there. Okay, and then you can go, now I get it. And a similar, let me bring in just a demonstration, something that I kind of got a little bit tuned in only recently. Right now, and this ties in again very well with love for all and hatred for none. Right now, one of the things that we're being educated through the media and through the implanted psychology is to at least fear Muslims. Okay? Now the reason why they only have to really feed the fear is because one of the normal responses from fear is anger and hatred. The real baseline thing is kind of fear. And then from fear, usually one of the reactions to fear is to get angry. It's kind of like a proactive thing to do. I fear, well, let them come and take me. You get all pumped up. But sometimes you won't get so pumped up, and you'll just kind of simmer and hate these people that you fear. You fear them. You hate them because they bring fear in. Nobody likes to be in a fear mode. And so there's really a manipulation. So what I'm talking about with traditions and cultures, and now in the Islamic tradition, there's two main schools, and that would be the Shia school and the Sunni school. Of course, then you have the mystic ones who are called Sufis. But the Sufi traditions, I think, largely draw. I mean, I think you can be Sufi, Shia, or Sunni, but since the Sunni is a larger group, very often your mystics will be Sunni mystics. But mystics are mystics. They're kind of going to another level, which is one of the reasons we have mystic view. Taking things to another plane. And also generally the mystics, although they might really adhere to what the letter is, they interpret the letters, of the words, the literal things. They tend to have a less literal or sometimes a lot less literal interpretation of the scripture. But anyway, the Shia, one of the things that broke off that caused a division was that one of the people that I guess was that a group was following in the early days of Islam. There were still a lot of tribes, and so you had kind of like these groupings of like, I guess, teachers, and then they had their followers. And but anyway, there in that division, there was I guess a grandson of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and he was the one that a large group of followers thought was the person that they should be following, and he got killed in a really brutal way by the people who didn't agree with him, and that created a schism with them. And a similar schism is Roman Catholic Church versus Eastern Orthodox, or the original Christianity, because Eastern Orthodox is kind of like Russian Orthodox and Greek Orthodox, but then you have the Christians in Syria and Armenia, and they're not Eastern Orthodox, but they're not Roman Catholic either. They're kind of the original Christianity before the Council of Nicaea and before popes. And but with the Shia, the Shia tend to ritualistically grieve the murder of their follower. His name will come to me in a moment. I do know his name. And in part of their grief, so now this is where, now if you might remember years back, they might have showed you a ritual practice of a group of Muslims who happen to be the Shia Muslims, whipping themselves. Okay, you see them whipping themselves. Now, of course, you'll have people who will whip themselves more ritualistically. You'll have other ones who will really get into it. I mean, we have Christians who enact crucifixions. All right, so I remember when they were showing the self-flagellation that was going on during a certain holiday. And again, this is expressing grief. That's what it is. It's not masochistic. They're sharing their grief, sharing their pain, or trying to experience some of the pain in empathy with their tragically murdered person. Who, I wish his name would come to me. And although it might not be that important, but since the ambassador is a Muslim, I'd like to get some of this terminology straight. So whipping's one of them. But another thing is they'll beat on their chests. And there's a couple of Islamic teachers I like. One is a Sunni Islamic teacher, and that's Sheikh Imran Hussein. And then there's a Shia person who puts up really good videos. His last name is half the time I can't remember. Ammar is his middle name, and he does talks, and he will speak. He went to school, I guess. He went to school in the UK, probably London, and he has a very nice London accent. Although often before he speaks in English, he'll speak in Arabic, and which is really thick. But when he speaks English, he speaks in a really nice English accent. And when he's normally speaking, he speaks in a very strident voice. It's very clear, very well enunciated. He speaks very well. But the moment, Hussein, I think, is actually also the name of the grandson of the Prophet that was murdered. But whenever he goes into speaking about that time, and this is supposed to be an emotional time, his voice changes. It's almost like a Christian preacher who might go, "Yes, okay, don't forget everybody, here comes the plate. And don't forget it's Jesus," that kind of voice that they get into where they get real dramatic. Well, this gentleman, this teacher, this scholar, also he'll, like I said, was speaking that beautiful English accent, really well enunciated. But the moment he goes into speaking about the murder of Hussein, he will get into his wavery voice. "And he took his time, and they pierced him with 10 arrows, and there he laid on the ground." And that's kind of the voice, that kind of trembling. And that's probably actually a pretty good impersonation. If you ever hear him, you'll see I got him pretty good. And So it's kind of reminds me of when when Christians want you to get all emotive about Jesus, they kind of, especially in the more Pentecostal religions, they put on a different voice, and when he gets there, he puts on another voice. But and then very often when he does speak about it, and they go into length about the tragedy of it, they really go into just what a nasty murder it was, and they seem to go into it with great gusto. They relive it. And whenever he goes into that voice, speaking of the murder of Hussein, usually you'll hear people crying. Usually women. Women cry a little bit easier than men. There might be men crying too. I can't make out all the voices. But apparently that's the appropriate response. Almost as if, like, if somebody says, and such and Christian, you go amen or something. Well, when a scholar, I guess, is speaking about the murder of Hussein, then tears are considered appropriate because it's a horrible time and where you're kind of grieving his murder. And but anyway, and beating of the chest. So a lot of that's, again, this is cultural, and it was like really just through sitting down and learning about these things that when you look on the outside and go, oh, what bizarre people, you might think, and then you get in and you go, oh, okay, now you know the story. You kind of understand that, again, this is a ritualistic acting out of the murder and the proper grief being shown, and it all makes sense. Now, just like I feel, with certain emotionality in Christianity, emotionality in Islam kind of strikes me the same. It's like, okay, we're getting a little worked up here, but that's what they do. That's how they connect. Again, if I don't think it's for me, then I don't need to attend. I don't need to offend somebody else because that's what they like to do. And but again, like I said, I saw news things many years ago, but when they would show the holiday where people were walking down the streets and the men would be without shirts, and like I said, some of them would really be digging in with that whip. Some of them might even be drawing blood. Because again, you have certain people get a little more gusto with what they do than other people do. And so some people might just ritualistic do it, and of course somebody, the funny thing is, because we are herd mentality for the most part, some of us are wired differently. I'm one of them. But we tend to look to each other to make sure that we're doing something right. So I guess maybe if you're doing the whip and you're not at least pulling up some red marks on your back, somebody might look and you go, I guess you're not really into this. So again, there's peer pressure on you. There's all these men, they're all doing the same thing, and of course the guy behind you sees what you're doing. So certain people might go, I better hit myself hard enough to get some red. I mean, I'm in there, but this is a ritual, and I'm getting into the head, and I don't have to really get worked up on. And apparently some people just really dig in and will create some blood because they think that really means that they're touching into the emotion of Hussein being murdered. And who's to deny them that right? Again, this is an individual, this is a ritual, and each person will apply it as they see fit. So I use these as instances only because the media and our culture the media will use our culture as, and especially in America where we're the exceptional nation. So that I guess that means that we have an exceptional culture, and so they kind of use all of that psychological preparation, which again, the fact that we think we're the exceptional nation is not something that we were sitting around and we all went together. Oh yeah, we're the exceptional nation. No, we were told by the news and by our politicians and anybody else who gets a public forum that we're the exceptional nation, at least on the normal channels. And the normal channels are the ones that are controlled by people with lots of money and invested interest in the psychology of the populace. So they use our psychology based on our exceptional culture, and then they'll point to differences in other cultures, and the whole thing is to make them other. Okay, that's the key word when it comes to kind of fomenting hate and things, is creating an other, and then of course trying to make the other for at least strange, bizarre, but hopefully hateful, and most likely, and most importantly, scary. And even if they can't, even before the terrorism became the main scary thing, what they would do is they would kind of like, sometimes go into like one of these festivals or, holidays, especially the Shia, and then they'll show them whipping themselves, and they go, look, see, these are the Muslims. Look at their weird traditions, and then people go, oh yeah, man, boy, we want one of them living next to me. Boom, there's your gate, there's your wall. You've built a wall and a gate that these kind of people are not people I want as my neighbors. I probably wouldn't want my daughter marrying one, because usually if you don't want one as your neighbor, you don't want one in your family. So this is how hatred is built, by creating scary people, by creating others. It's very important, if you could go back and see newsreels from World War II and see about, the Huns, the Germans were the Huns, and then you had the Japs, and they were all cast as monsters and whatever. And of course, part of that is because they were projecting to young men who were going to be drafted or would enlist, and they had to make sure when the men had a gun in their hand and saw the other people, that they saw them as people to be feared, hated, scary people that needed to be killed. All right? That's how it works. And that is recognizing that is the hugest part of the control system of the Matrix, the Cabal, the Illuminati, whatever you want to call them, the scumbags, okay, the control scumbags. They use their tools, and largely those tools are the media. And then once they get inside our psychology, they count on peer pressure. So if somebody doesn't buy the programming that comes through the media, when they decide to be independent amongst their friends and stuff, their friends who've been properly programmed go, what do you mean? They're bad people. And then the other person either shifts their psychology to resonate with them, or they learn to keep their mouths shut. And which isn't a very good thing either. And so anyway, but this is all kind of building to the importance of holidays and traditions. By appreciating what we have, we should extrapolate that it's good to do it for other people. That would make sense. If we're all created by the same God, then we should have, and we love ourselves and we love our neighbors as we love ourselves. Then if we have holidays and traditions that we like and love, we should extend it to other people that they'll have holidays and traditions that they like and love. And they may look really different than ours, but so what? They're different culture. They're a different cheese. And so this is, to me, one of the things that we're going to try and emphasize in the love for all and hatred for none day, because the hatred is fake hatred in almost every instance. It's fabricated hatred. There was a book about manufactured consent. It's a manufactured hatred. Just like they manufacture consent, they also manufacture hatred. It's all done psychologically. It's all done through the media. That's how. I've said it before on a lot of my videos. The word conspiracy theorist that some of our friends might use when we discuss certain subjects with them, they didn't. Nobody at home made that up and passed it amongst their friends. That was delivered through the media. It was meant to be a blanket to throw over those of us who have quote unquote alternative ideas or theories of conspiracy. And like any good theory, we will usually have some facts. Now, there are some conspiracy theories out on the alternate thing that don't have a lot of facts. And they are kind of nutty. But there are some major conspiracies that have considerable facts that are different from the official facts. 9/11 might be just one instance, and we won't go into any details. This is a non-alcoholic beer, and I'm thirsty. Hopefully it'll be burp-free. But with the love for all, hatred for none day, it's about us it's about bringing the awareness that we're being manipulated. We're being manipulated by the media. And one of the biggest payoffs for not hating each other would be we would no longer without the others, without the other scary people, without the ones that are coming to get us, whether it's the Russians or the Muslims or whatever, the boogeyman or ISIS, who is a completely manufactured boogeyman. I mean, I'm not saying that some of them aren't going organic and rogue, but they are a boogeyman. And they, like I've even said in my other videos, with the face masks and stuff, they look like boogeymen. And one of the biggest things that will happen when we stop fearing other people and hating other people is we won't be so thrilled to see billions, if not trillions of dollars that could go into infrastructure and responsible social programs. Instead of that money, that money would be able to get there because we would no longer be thrilled about our exceptional nation having whatever hundreds of bases across the globe. We wouldn't be thrilled about the billions of dollars, or the $500 million that got spent on funding people to go fight Assad in Syria. Again, another manufactured boogeyman. I mean, the 250,000 death toll that has been created by these rebels that were financed and turned into an army that now hold, the caliphate was made possible by all the funding from the nations who were kind of in alignment, and that's kind of the United States, the UK, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, United Arab Emirates. That's those five are and Turkey. And Turkey. And Turkey. So they've been, they're the ones who've been funding ISIS and making it possible for them to seize huge chunks of land and getting airlifted out when they're about to get captured, and getting food when they're hungry, and new weapons when they're running out, and ammunition. I mean, again, it's a boogeyman. ISIS is a boogeyman, and it's financed. Anyway, if we didn't hate people, and we didn't need to have all these walls, and didn't think we needed a $1 trillion per year army to defend us from them, then there might be we might look at things like all these different social programs being defunded, whether Social Security, this, that, the other thing, the fact that bridges are falling apart, the fact that we, as the exceptional nation, don't have a high-speed railroad. France has one. China has a bunch of them. I mean, you go to Europe, and in China might be the leader as far as the miles of tracks of high-speed rail. We don't have any in the United States. And one of the reasons we don't is we really can't afford it because we're too busy fighting all those people that are so scary. And but they're not really scary. They're just adversaries to the kind of the one world unipolar world with the United States as the head. These are people who are resisting. And as this empire tries to establish itself, it basically sees people who are resisting the empire. So they identify them as rebels or bad nations. Oh, that's right, back to Syria. Let me finish up in Syria. So anyway, the almost 250,000 people that have been killed in the ongoing battles with ISIS and all the other little rebel groups that are offshoots of it and are all part of the Sunni, Wahhabist, Salafist, extremist view. They're the ones who in their battles have killed them. Then you'll see the mainstream media trying to blame 250,000 people's deaths on Assad bombing his own people. I mean, the lies that come out of the West, especially out of the White House and the State Department, are just beyond the pale. They're fairy tales, except those fairy tales have they're more like a grim fairy tale is what they're like. And so once we stop hating each other, and it's really important, and that's I think why it's good. I mean, this day is a worldwide day that we're trying to spread, but it's really crucial in the United States because we're the ones giving consent to our government to have all these bases, to be funding all this stuff, to be neglecting our social programs, to be neglecting our infrastructure, because we see it as a sacrifice to keep us safe. And we would feel safe if we didn't fear the things that we're told we need to fear. So it's really part of the Love for All, Hatred for None Day is bringing awareness of how much we're manipulated. And hopefully, we can get that at critical mass where people realize there really is nobody, there's no human being as a group that I need to fear. There are nut jobs out there, but the nut jobs are the minority. And it's the news that can take isolated events and make them look larger. I mean, you can live in a completely safe neighborhood, and if you watch your local news, they usually will have at least a murder a night. So, and part of that is even if you live in the safest of communities, you still have this fear. Ooh, somebody got murdered. And meanwhile, most people I know have never met anybody that they know who's been murdered or had a family member murdered in those harsh ways. I mean, I'm 62 years of age, and I've met less than a handful of people who actually have had a family member murdered in like a street crime or the kind of crime, the murders that we get on the news all night. So even that kind of fear is part of what we do, is part of the media. And again, it amplifies what is. That camera's eye makes it look like a whole lot more is going on. I mean, even when they show the pictures of ISIS and their rows of Toyota trucks and the men, it's through a camera. And it's usually in the desert, and you see this long lower trucks, and they'll tell you, 10,000 men. But you get in the camera, and you can only count maybe about, 12 trucks, maybe about 40 guys. And the camera, the use of the camera is such, there might only be 15 trucks and 60 guys. Because you need the overlap. But that all I have to do is take that shot. You see this long, what looks like an endless stream of trucks, even though it might not be endless because the camera doesn't let you see the end. And you see a bunch of guys, with their boogeyman masks on, and then they tell you that there's hordes and hordes and hordes of them. So I think a lot of that is a trick of the camera. One of the most interesting tricks of the camera was when Russia bombed a whole bunch of ISIS oil trucks, and they showed the video. They showed you. I mean, it starts off. You see the bomb bay doors, and then it goes down, and then you hear a couple of days later that the United States bombed 138 trucks. And I remember I might have repeated myself here, but they said, "Oh no!" I said that sounds kind of ridiculous. And then a couple of days later, PBS is covering that particular story, and so they show the United States bombing the trucks, except the footage they used was the Russian footage. Identical Russian footage, same length of video, same opening thumbnail. So again, the media, the news, is a psychological tool for opinion forming. And so it's a part of what we're trying to do with our day, which I also kind of call short for the Ambassador's Day, because it's his initiative. He came up with the title. He came up with what he wanted to do. So, and sometimes calling it Ambassador's Day is shorter than going Love for All and Hatred for None Day. And you know how we are. We're always looking to shorten things. And so I'm really hoping that through appreciation, that's why this is about tradition and culture. Because a big part of dropping the hate is appreciating other people's traditions and cultures and not making them wrong for being different. And also allowing people to be different and to be more cautious that when other people are telling us that people who are different than us are to be feared, or that they're wrong and that we need to drop some bombs on them or put sanctions on them, then we agree with it. I mean, was like 500,000 children died during the sanctions on Iraq that Clinton imposed on them, and Madeleine Albright says it was worth it. And again, for what? Were the Iraqis coming over to invade us? Are the Syrians coming over to invade us? Are the Russians going to come over and invade us? There's all these fake boogeymen. And again, the average person in America, they hear Madeleine Albright go, it was worth it. And they go, oh, it must have been worth it. Madeleine Albright said it was worth it. President Clinton did it. So, and Hillary Clinton's also, backing it up. And so what does this turn us into by accepting that? It turns us into monsters. By being willing to consent to and say, oh, that's all right to kill all those people, is along the lines of saying, oh, it was all right for Pol Pot to kill however millions of people he killed. it was okay for Mao to mow through 55 million people or whatever, because there were famines that killed people too. It wasn't like he killed everybody like with like guns or stuff. And of course the Hitler thing. And so it is our acquiescence and our kind of quiet consent for these horrors that kind of turns us into monsters. And I hope everybody is in the mood for not being a monster anymore. And part of that, and we stop being monsters when we stop hating other people who we think are monsters. We stop being monsters when we stop turning everybody else into monsters. Because especially being in the United States and with our military, which is bar none the biggest military, it certainly is the biggest. As far as overall, I mean, the Chinese have more men, the Russians might have more advanced, we don't know. But again, when it comes to the United States military, everybody knows it is the 800-pound gorilla. And as long as that 800-pound gorilla is going around stomping on people, and we're not telling our government, stop it, bring that gorilla home, then we're complicit. And that turns us into monsters. And so in love for all and hatred for none, we can love not only the other, we can love ourselves. We can forgive ourselves for having supported a really ugly government for so long. And we can also forgive anybody actually not even forgiving. Most people we hate, we don't need to forgive. We need to ask them for forgiveness for hating them in the first place. And then we have, the people who lied to us. We can't hate them either. The politicians who lie to us. We can't hate them. Hate for none. This is really important, because by hating you create enemies, and we don't have enemies. We just have people we might have challenges and issues with, and we need to get these things figured out. And once the United States and its people and people in Europe who are very deluded pull together in their own culture and their own people and start to think straight, then they can say to their government, we need to talk. And right now, all you have is isolated pockets who are saying that, we need to talk. And even the isolated pockets, the people who are protesting, in many ways, they're not protesting in a way that's a dialogue. It's almost like, again, they put people on a defensive. You need to go. We should string you up on a lamppost, whatever. And we don't need that. We need dialogue. But for dialogue, one side at least has to be reasonable. And so when it comes to government, when it comes to the people talking to the government, the people are going to have to be reasonable first. The government's not going to get reasonable first. So we have to get reasonable first. And part ways we get reasonable is we love all and we hate none. We really have to get the hate thing out of ourselves. Now, when we were proposing this, there were a lot of people that had resistance to the word hatred. Oh, what you look at grows, whatever. But the other, to me, the more important thing, and yeah, if you focused on the hate, yes. But in this case, we're trying to diffuse it. And so it comes into what you resist persists. And one of the, when we were having our discussions about the usage of this word, I said, there is no denying that there's hatred in the world. And so to ignore the word hatred and its implications and how miserable it's made the world is to deny it. And that's called being in denial. And we can't be in denial. You can't get better. Anybody who's done any kind of self-work knows you to get nowhere through denial. So the real thing is we had to leave in the word hatred because it's a reality. We can't deny that there's hatred in the world. And even in our own culture, a big part of the American monstrosity is the creation of fear, which creates hate. Even if people don't use it, fear, hate, and anger are this nasty little trio that go together. Envy is another thing that can fit in, but since I'm already almost at 50 minutes, I won't go into envy. But envy plays very strong in how cultures look at each other. Culture envy is definitely there in certain aspects, and how that can also set up things. But envy isn't the real problem here. It isn't the real problem here. It's fear, anger, and hatred. And fear, anger, and hatred that is mostly fake fear, anger, and hatred created by the media, the government, basically the opinion makers. Because most people are directable. and the news has always been, oh, let me get informed. But as they say, if you ever, like if they, news flash, if you're watching TV and suddenly there's a news, an update, in the old days, they still say it sometimes, when you go back to your regular show, what do they say? We now return you to your regularly scheduled programming. The news update was special programming. The regular TV is your regularly scheduled programming. Just remember that. Okay, I think I've said enough for this mystic view. I might have said too. I might, again, I might have gotten wordy, but so what? So let me say goodnight. It is almost 2 o'clock in the morning, and thank you for listening. Remember, love for all, hatred for none. God bless.